back in 2006-7 time frame, was almost as big an economy as India is today, 3.7 trillion. And the next 15 years are obviously, a complete story in itself. A lot of Chinese Americans went back to China to really help build the nation. Kudos to Sharad for having done this 15 years earlier than most people would have expected Indian Americans to go back and build the country. Tell us about the journey, the personal journey of really, being here for so long, having worked for some of the best companies in the 90s, including Houston and others, to go back to India. And we'll talk about the piece around 2009, but let's stay within the 2009 time. What was your mindset and what were you thinking?
So I turned 45 in 2009, and I asked myself the question, what is it that I really want to do? And I said, instead of making more money, I want to make a bigger impact. And so that's really, it's as simple as that. And how this all came about was that in 2004, one of the companies that I was a co-founder of, Delicate Technologies, had become part of Cisco. And this was a wireless infrastructure startup. And at that time, if some of you remember 2000, the dot-com crash, nobody built a telecom infrastructure company, and this had a modest exit. And my wife said, look, you're going to get busy with something else. And if we had a 6.5-year-old daughter, and we should expose her to Indian culture now. So take a sabbatical. So I reluctantly took a year sabbatical, went back to India for a year, and this was in 2004, and then got pulled into a bunch of other things. But by the time I got to 2009, it was clear that I wasn't the only one who was having this angst. Because back in '93, I had gone to Bangalore to set up the AT&T R&D, and AT&T had not had the trimester, so it was what was then AT&T, Lucent, Avaya, and many other people were doing it. Oracle had established its R&D centers there, and by the time you got to 2009, people had been in those R&D centers for 15-20 years, and they all had an angst that they were doing something for the West, but they were not doing anything for India. And I like to tell the story of Sanjay Jain, if I may. And some of you use Google Maps, and one of the things that made Google Maps successful was MapMaker. And it so happened that the two Indians that were driving that project is Lalitesh Katrakada, who was here in the valley, and I see nodding head. Google's first acquisition in its history was Lalitesh's startup, a CMU PhD, and Sanjay Jain. And these two guys were there, and Sanjay had this angst. And so you often see these videos where, one person starts dancing and soon the whole group is dancing. And so the person who actually danced was Sanjay. I was in Yahoo at that time trying to hire him. And he said, Sharad, I want to do this, I want to do something different. I related to him, but he was the one who had the gumption to give up a hot project in Google. Google was like it is now, it was a very hot company, and become the volunteer chief product officer of Aadhaar. And in some sense, the conception of India Stack comes from Sanjay. So I think this whole group then mobilized itself, and it's turned out to be a change, because it's an old civilization, right? And we remain an unbroken civilization because we're not swayed with the wind every time something new came along. And so one of our DNA as a country is to be slow to change. And so the question was, what would be our theory of change, right? And one of the theory of change was that if we have to bring change about, we will have to co-opt the market, and we'll have to co-opt the policymakers. And we said, what better way to do that is to say that we will be catalysts, we will be provocateurs of change. We'll build the public tech, because that's the background we came with. But we should be able to motivate the private sector to solve India's hard problems and make money doing that. Because the richest Indians should be the best innovators, right? And so our goal was to enable the innovators to innovate for what, unfortunately or fortunately, is a broad word now. But back in time, when we said Bharat, Bharat meant India too, the middle India. It didn't mean all of India at that time. Colloquially, it meant the middle India. And our goal was that our private sector was not innovating for middle India. And I had been an angel investor in a company called Bharat Matrimony. How many of you know that? I used to be on the board of Bharat Matrimony.
Many lives here.
Yeah. So I used to be on the board of Bharat Matrimony, and he's a wonderful entrepreneur. And he drilled into me saying that, look, this Bharat thing is all right, but these are problems that a single company cannot solve, right? And the second company, I ended up being an investor and a board member, and I got off the board relatively recently, about 2.5 years ago, was then called News Hunt, and it's called Daily Hunt. And I don't know how many of you know the largest Indian app is Daily Hunt. It's in all vernacular news, 42 million daily actives, DAUs, right? But those are people who are from Salem and want news in Tamil about Salem, so that when they talk to their mother or sister or brother, they're knowledgeable about their native, and it doesn't seem that they are disconnected. So if you want news about these local pockets, you needed to read the local newspaper, and when they started, the local newspapers were not even online, and you needed to build an app on a Java phone to be able to do that. Things have become a lot easier now, and I ended up being a investor and a board member there, and I could see how difficult this was. So the goal was that heavy lifting in India to improve lives in Bharat has to be done by private sector. And if it has to be done by private sector, we can assist, enable with infrastructure, but they are the ones doing it. So we wanted to signal to them that there will never be a time that we will even ask for donation from you if you end up doing that, right? So this is why no greed. And the no glory is a very simple statement saying that, if you do something where you don't want credit for it, you can co-opt anybody in the process, and that has worked for us.
I find that we are more sponge than China. China is a very militant society, culture. They're like, okay, the whole world is against us, and we need to protect ourselves. India, with the very fact that 1.4 billion people, at least 700 million of us are part of the Anglosphere, says something about change, that we are actually amenable to change. And it's a very service-oriented culture, which I think has helped me as an entrepreneur as well. When I look at a customer, it's like, as they say, even in the Kirana store where I actually used to have a udhar khata, talk about the grahak, and that's very true of the culture. So this service mindset, the fact that we can learn a language, we can get every religion into the country, probably one of the most immigrant-friendly country for the longest time. Only America in the last 100 years, 150 years has really inculcated that. So is there a paradox in what you said about we are not amenable to change, at the same time we are such a change-worthy country?
Everything that you said is true. But I'm going to say something a little bit kind of controversial here. See, Israel would not have become Israel if the Arabs didn't galvanize them to be the best version of themselves. Taiwan would not be Taiwan if they didn't feel that we have to galvanize ourselves to be the best version of ourselves because of China. I think in India, Pakistan has not been a sufficient galvanizing force. And therefore, we have to use China as that galvanizing force to up our game, right? Now, look, I live in Bangalore. This is my second stint in Bangalore, right? I was there 93 to 97 setting up the AT&T R&D, and I've been back there since 2004. Everybody's been telling the Bangalore politicians, get your act together, otherwise you lose out to somebody else, Hyderabad or Chennai or Pune. You think they've been affected by that? You've been to Bangalore. You think they get the religion on this at all, that something's going to go away? No.
It's the weather, by the way.
So the problem is that we are a very open society to ideas, we are a very open society to people, to a let live culture, which is our ethos. But at the same time, I think we are very comfortable not dealing with things that are systemically broken. And we are a very big optimist kind of culture. If a bus kind of unfortunate accident happens, the headline will not be that 30 people died, 20 were saved, right? So the motivation to change has not been there, and I think we need to create that. And some of it is coming from a bigger grand narrative that has taken root in India, and therefore a gap that has opened between what we aspire to be and what we have the capacity to be. And I think this will give us the galvanizing force. And hopefully China, I am in the camp saying China should have as many pinpricks as possible. And the more pinpricks, they let them do a few things on the border here and there. And the more they do, the more galvanizing force will be there to deal with China and close the gap with China. That would be...
Within, actually just burns the house as well. Speaking of policymakers, when I look back, 2009 was still Congress era. So this thing was hopefully seeded by a more left-leaning government, and obviously the ideation came from there, with this execution, implementation, and the iron fist of the right-wing government. Is this thing so secular now that it basically will transcend left and right and any government that comes in? And can we draw a parallel with growth? Saying, okay, 3.7 trillion, growing at 6%, real growth, add another 6-7% inflation, that's 13% growth. India becomes a $10 trillion economy, independent of who came with this. Even somebody that most people would say is not worth governing, like Rahul Gandhi, or would it be BJP or whoever. What do you think of some of these things are unstoppable forces, including things like DPI?
Question into two parts. See, the first is one of the core ideas that I think we latched on very early is actually not an Indian idea. Is the idea why Silicon Valley is called Silicon Valley. I know how many of you know this story. And see, I was in AT&T, so this is a story well told in AT&T. In 1953, every patent on the transistor was owned by AT&T. And they were influenced by Vannevar Bush, who wrote this famous memo, Science the Endless Frontier, in July 1945, which became official policy in July of 1946. And if we have time, we'll go into the details. But it was essentially this idea that if the US had to compete, it had to do what they had done in the military, which was to build a science and technology-based military machine. And in 1946 onwards, they went down this path of trying to build a science and technology-based economic machine. And what did they say in that memo? He said there'll be economic competition, and the only way to compete with the rest is to build a science and technology-based economy. And of course, in his speeches, Vannevar Bush, who by the way was the Dean of Engineering of MIT, also the co-founder of Raytheon, his argument in speeches was that this is not economic competition, this is going to be economic war. And this war can only be won like that. And that set the stage for the kind of economy we have in the US. And the thinking was that when companies do well, if they benefit from this public research or public infrastructure or public technology that has been created, they make outsized profits, because who created this model that you have, let's say for mRNA, that for 15 years or 16 years, mRNA was completely funded by the US taxpayer. It's only in the last 4 or 5 years that it was co-funded by the private players, but 100% of the profits go to the private players. This was explicitly a model created by Vannevar Bush, right? But he said, when you make these outsized profits, you have an obligation to give back to society. He was such an influential figure that in 1953, AT&T decided on its own, saying that if an American entrepreneur chooses to commercialize the transistor, they shall not assert their patent rights. You were a Canadian entrepreneur, Korean, Indian, British, any other country, you couldn't do it because this offer was available only to an American entrepreneur. And one of those entrepreneurs, Shockley, as you know, was working in AT&T. He decided to leave AT&T to do that, and Who was he? He was one of the 3 Nobel Prize winners of AT&T. Think of this. But his fear was that this AT&T in its enthusiasm has announced this, I'm going to make so much of money that they may change their mind. So he goes to his old boss. During the war effort, he was working for the microwave project. At that time, the microwave project was headed by a guy called Frederick Terman. Does that name ring a bell here? Terman. Yes. Who was he? He came after the war and became the head of engineering for Stanford University. At that time, a piddly university, not a major university. And what did he tell? So this guy flew all the way to take advice from Terman. मैं क्या करूं? ये इतना पैसा बनाऊंगा, ये they will change their mind. He said, तुम West Coast आ जाना. So Shockley came here. Now it so turned out that he was such a charismatic guy that he could get anybody that he wanted. But some people also describe him as the world's worst manager. So 84 teams left him to start companies in the valley. This is why this damn place is called Silicon Valley. Right? So now what happened is, this was not the only time AT&T did that. AT&T gave away Unix for free. How many of you use a MacBook? Right? I also use it because I like to believe my Unix kernel code is still running there. I was a Unix kernel engineer, right? And so the point is, AT&T gave it free the second time. And it completely transformed the industry, because at that time Unix went on to change the landscape of the computer industry as we know it. Why did this company do it? Because their idea was that we benefited from the Vannevar Bush model and we have an obligation to give back. So many of us came from this, and when we started looking at this Bharat problem that all these companies were facing, we realized that there was a missing thing in India. The missing thing was that there was no DARPA. Without DARPA, there would be no Cisco there. There was no Stanford research. Without Stanford research, there would be no Google here. If there was no GPS, there would be no Uber here. The history of Silicon Valley was also a jugalbandi between public goods and private innovation. Although Silicon Valley refuses to acknowledge it today because the companies have become so powerful, they feel it is not needed. But this is not the truth. The truth is the jugalbandi drives the wealth creation that happens in this ecosystem. So the first idea that we adopted was that we can't rely on CSIR labs to become DARPA. We can't rely on an IISc to become Stanford University. But damn it, we were all techies. Why can't we get together and build this stuff out so that the others could use it? So this is, I think, just this idea. Now, the idea that is not called mainstream, and we need your help to make it go mainstream, because you can play a role, you have influence all over the world, is that India should become a product nation. So I'll give you an example. May I spend a few minutes on this? Bangalore has a lot of garment exports, job work for garments. Some of this has benefited because China +1 policy. Now the question is, who's benefited most about it? Is it Vietnam? Is it Bangladesh? It's India? It's Sri Lanka? How to find out? The easy way to find out is to see who is buying more industrial sewing machines. So by that yardstick, Vietnam is doing better than Bangladesh, Bangladesh is doing better than India, India is doing better than Sri Lanka. The difference is, 12 years ago, those industrial sewing machines used to be Japanese and German. Today, 82% of those industrial sewing machines are Chinese. And the money is in the sewing machines, is not in the job work. So China will make more money of our garment exports than we will make ourselves. You don't believe me? You know what? Surat is the epicenter for diamond cutting. All diamond cutting machines are either Israeli and are Swiss. Today they make more money of our diamond cutting than we make ourselves. You know this. All the airlines of the world put together make less money than Boeing and Airbus. Pfizer makes more money pre-COVID. I don't even know the numbers post-COVID, so it must be much higher. They make more money than top 100 hospital chains here in the US put together. Chains put together. top 100 US hospital chains, right? You know that European mobile operators, all of them put together, last year made less money than Cisco, which is having a difficult profit year. Anybody from Cisco here? Right? So I could go on and on. Microsoft's lowest profit year was 2013. In that year, they made more money than all top 20 IT services companies of the world put together, not just Indian. So what in India we've not realized that the value capture has actually two parts, serfs and landlords. We are only in the serf part of the business, we are not in the landlord part of the business. And that landlord part of the business needs a new kind of a mindset, because you have to be in a circle of 3 or 5. You have to be like our ISRO. You have to be not 60 countries that have sent a satellite to space, but 5 countries that can send it to space.
But I want to add a question.
That idea hasn't yet taken root in India. And
Well,
the work that needs to be done is to bring that idea to life as we go forward in the next step.
So maybe the why of that, and this goes back to risk and trust and laws of the land. Like here, not just VCs in the valley, but the banking system, the credit system, the loan system, the ability to actually go and look at anything that's a collateral, and to go and really have this be implemented and executed under the proper purview of the.
It may be Mavenir, which is a company doing well. Nobody would say that it will be an Indian company. If you invite me here next year, you can see if my prediction is right. Hens will be tens. Can you guess what that tea will be? Does anybody know Desh Pandey?
Yeah.
He used to be the chairperson of this company. Tejas.
Tejas. But Tejas got acquired by somebody.
54%. You want me to tell you the story about that?
Yes.
Can I do that? Right? See, so what we realized is, I was telling Asha a little while back. Where is Asha? Where is she?
Right here.
Yeah. So Asha was telling you that India stack is only one bet. Luckily, for a variety of favorable conditions, I think, because there are many things which could have gone wrong, like you know this, and it's worked out. We made 6 new bets. One of those bets is in the telecom area. We are hoping that even if 3 of those bets work out, we will have a template that will allow India to make 16 new bets. That is the next thing that we have to get the society in India to buy into, right? Because if you were Korea, 3 bets would have been enough. 3-4 bets would propel us in this beyond the middle income gap.
But again, you went back to the 50s to the 90s, military-industrial complex that basically funded a lot of tech. Before VCs came on board, where is the military-industrial complex in India that could be the first consumer and the first user of many of these things?
See, it has an organization called DRDO, which sucks up all the money, produces nothing at all. And thankfully, they finally formed a committee headed by Sujan to reform DRDO.
Who is it?
Sujan Chena. And Sujan and I were part of the T20 because I was leading the DPI initiative for G20 because it touches many, so T20. But Sujan was heading all the parts of it. He's a great guy. So I think there is an appreciation that we got to fix it, but the reform that was needed did not happen. So what could have driven this? It could have defense, like in Israel, could have driven it. It could have been consumer products that could have driven it. Our bet that we made with India stack is that Bharat will drive this. Because Bharat, the Western template for anything, for financial inclusion doesn't work in Bharat. For education doesn't work in Bharat. For health doesn't work in Bharat. So if we can find our Indian templates to serve Bharat, then we can create a whole ecosystem around it, and to some extent that has certainly worked out, especially for financial inclusion. But coming back to the Tejas story, so the goal 2 years back was to first pull this together. No big Indian company wanted to invest in this opportunity. So a consortium was created of 16 small companies, of which the largest was Tejas, 15 other companies,
called the Voice Consortium and cajoled them to demonstrate an end-to-end call, which they were able to demonstrate last year in the Indian Mobile Congress. Thankfully, we have a wonderful minister, Ashwini Vaishnav. You have seen him. He saw this working. He got the PM to come to see this working. And he agreed that BSNL will buy only Indian. So they floated a RFP for that. And in the RFP, 5 people competed for that. This Voice Consortium, which is iSpirit instigated, but Reliance actually bought a company, a US company called Raxis to participate in it. Sterlite, for heaven's sake, I don't know why. But and Tech Mahindra and the like. And so they all gave them small cities, Bhopal, Chandigarh. The only one, can you guess which is the only one whose pilot worked? Of course, that Voice Consortium in Chandigarh. Now what happened was this became a single vendor thing. The government said we can't do single vendor. Telecom is very risky doing single vendor. Allegations of corruption, right? So finally, and even Reliance, the same Reliance who was praising last time, now is going out and saying, no, redo the tender, because they're hoping that next time around they'll get more time to do this. But time is an enemy, because this window is a very, very short window, right? And I give the credit entirely to Ashwini Vaishnav, or Honorable Minister Ashwini Vaishnav. Quiet person, fully understands the implications. He got the buy-in that was needed. The cabinet decided we will continue with this, and we will, however, have all decisions to be ratified by a group of ministers. But now we could smell that a possibility of success. The combined revenues of the Voice Consortium were less than $250 billion. The likely order that BSNL would place would be $1 billion. Can a government place $1 billion order on a company that has only $250 million? No. So we bent and begged in Bombay, bhai, khareed lo iska 50% or more. The only person who agreed and deeply appreciative of him, nobody else wanted to show interest. But Chandra actually took that bet. He bought 54% of pitches. And therefore, that order was placeable. Luckily, that order is not $1 billion, it's $2.9 billion order. 100,000 base stations. For the first time, India is using its local market to build a local player at a scale that is commendable. Now, if only now this damn thing works, in the field, which means you don't have to climb up the tower at least once or twice a year, it's commercially viable. I am very confident because Sanjay Nayak is an extraordinary leader. And if it works, I think we'll all celebrate hens becoming tens. It won't become cents with Cisco, it won't be Alcatel. Now, this kind of thinking is what we need to create the product companies. And I think that thinking is coming in pockets. We have to demonstrate. In India, talking doesn't get anything done. You have to create facts on the ground. If you create facts on the ground, if you can get 2 more wins, one I think we'll get in defense, believe it or not, the third one we'll get in AI, we'll get to AI in a minute, and either the future India will be a Spain, or Spain is not a bad country, we all go there, it's a fun place to be, it's not poor either, but we will either be a Spain or a France. In 1974, Korea had lower per capita income than Thailand. 20 years of the Korean War had ended. They said, where are we going? We're not going anywhere. We must become a product nation. Today, Korean per capita income is 5.6 times that of Thailand. We'll either be a Thailand or a Korea. That is the fork in the road. And what I think allows us to make that fork in the road is the success of India Stack. Because that allows us to have a conversation saying, if you can do it once, can't you do it?
Love the passion by the look at this. It's flowing. Glad to see you. Maybe we should call him Sharad Sharma Bharat now, because you have to have a nickname like that. We should open this up for questions. I know I have tons of questions.
Can I ask one question about what you just mentioned about the media stack? Do you know, Sharad, if foundations like Inkstep and all these guys, Nandan Gilakani and that group, are they modularizing any part of the India stack and selling it to, let's say, established digital infrastructure in Brazil or in Africa or so. Are they doing that? Are they making money doing that? That's another question. And do you think that that's a wise thing to do? I mean,
So let me first answer. Do you know why Xtep is called Xtep? No. So Shankar Marwala, who's the head of Xtep, was an ice spirit politician. So the good part of Bangalore, which is complete, I'm not a local Bangalore person. I grew up in Delhi, and so I have more appreciation for it from an outside in. I like to say Bangalore has something special in its water. Because even when we disagree, we turn this into an asset. So one of our disagreements that has been there is ice spirit. If you read our volunteer handbook at volunteers.icespirit.in, you'll find the ice spirit thing is that we go for orbit ships. Because our view is radical change, incremental change costs the same effort. So अगर वही effort में radical change मिल रहा है तो why not go for that, right? Shankar's view is ऐसा नहीं होता. इंडिया में radical change नहीं आ सकता. Baby steps से ही आएगा. That is why it is called Ek Step. And Ek Step, what was decided back in time was that we had shortlisted 3 areas to focus on, which was financial inclusion, health, and education. And we picked financial inclusion. And we said, well, later, if it works, we'll come and do health. Education is what Ek Step picked. And frankly, education, so Nandan puts in 300 crores a year roughly, right, into Ek Step. How much does Premji put? Can anybody guess? I'll give you a choice. He puts also 300 crores. He puts 1,000 crores a year. He puts 6,000 crores a year.
into Xtep or something else?
Into education.
But
Not
separate-
into Xtep, into his own education
Okay.
sector.
6,000?
6,000.
6,000. In fact, the largest philanthropic effort in education is in Bangalore, separated by 2 kilometers between 2 individuals, Premji and Nandan, who get along very well with each other. Right? Has it made any change happen on the ground? No. So so we know that there are limits. Education is, by the way, very hard. Don't misunderstand. So one thing that is happening, so Ek Step is now pivoting to go into areas that it can make a difference.
And then how do you measure what?
Measure is that if you are in the education NGO, see, if you are a financial sector and you're looking for inclusion or empowering the people, can you avoid dealing with India style? It's impossible, right? You are in health, can you avoid dealing with a very nascent health stack? And I would tell you it's impossible. That's not true for education at all. So the theory of change, and there's nothing wrong because we collectively, it will be foolish to expect all our experiments to work, right? I am telling you out of the 6, if all 6 work, we are not trying hard enough, you know that, right? So 3 out of 6 is a good hit rate, if at all we can get that. So I think what is happening here is we are still trying to figure out what that system will be. Now, one of the areas that has come out is in 2080, believe it or not. So can somebody do me a favor, go to mosip.io, mosip.io, and just read out as you scroll a number which will be, I think, in 90 million. Last time I went, it was 92 million. If somebody can tell me what that number is.
94 million.
94 million people outside India are using India's digital identity system called MOSIP. And this will all grow to 350 million because the 11 countries who have signed up to it are 350 million in population. Right? Now, this was created in 2018 because it takes 4-5 years to get this going. The reason why G20 focused on DPI is because we have already 11 countries using our DPI for something which is foundational for them. And this includes Philippines. Every Filipino will get an ID, a national ID, which is going to come from IIIT Bangalore. Right? And every Sri Lankan is getting that, every Moroccan is getting that, and there are countries in the queue. So the question is that whether it will travel or not, it will. But what we need is to find a mechanism. So we are creating 2 centers. One is in IIM Bangalore, which I'm hoping one of you can help that center. Please do, and one is in IIIT itself. Nandan has been kind enough to give money under co-develop for the IIIT center, and we are still looking for anchor donors for the IIM center. Why do we need both? Because the real innovation, how many of you know about UPI? Alright. So what's the difference between Aadhaar and UPI? I know, I love to talk. I might do So, yes. So,
You're a fountain of
how
knowledge.
many of you have been to Chennai airport? The user fee of Chennai airport is exactly the same as Bangalore airport, or Bombay airport, or Delhi airport. Can you tell me which is a better airport?
Because I'm from
Bombay, isn't it? It's not even comparable to Chennai airport. Why? What's the difference? Chennai is a public infrastructure that is publicly provisioned. Bangalore, Pune, Delhi are privately provisioned public infrastructure. UPI is privately provisioned public infrastructure for payments. There is no such animal in the world, anywhere in the world. Now, not only is it unique, this animal this month, in October, actually in October, end of October, will account for 56% of the global digital transactions of the world. Right? So now the question is, people want to know what the protocol is. But people also want to know ये कैसे आप animal spirits लेके आ रहे हैं, right? In something that's public infrastructure, privately provisioned public infrastructure. Today that tacit knowledge is inside a bunch of volunteers who don't have the energy to support all this effort outside. So it has to go somewhere. So we have to park that knowledge in now this IIM center that we are talking about, so that it can travel to other parts of the world. So Asha, to your question, yes, India Stack will travel, but for that we need to create new institutions that will take it. Now, who will be the winner of this? From a private, because they're a very important question that you asked. You know, you can invest in that company if you like. I can't, because iSpirit rules don't allow me to invest in anything that iSpirit touches. And that company is when GSM, my first time I visited Sweden was 1992. Can you guess why? No, I was in Lucent. But why? Because the whole world was trying to see what is this new animal called the mobile GSM system. Right? And by 95, 50 countries had voted or decided for themselves that they want a GSM system. And why did they decide that? Which included India, because India got it in 97. Because India, even Indians knew at that time that while Stockholm is not like Bombay, but they knew कि वहाँ पे चलता है तो यहाँ भी चलेगा, right? Today we have 50 countries that have decided they want India style, but we don't have the mechanism to take it to them, and the companies that will take it to them are not Telenor and Telia. So they were the operators. Those operators didn't go elsewhere. But you know which other countries became global companies? Ericsson and Nokia. So the companies that will travel for, let's say, UPI or for MoSafe or for new part which is Nepal, they'll be the software infrastructure companies. So for UPI, that will be a company like, not PhonePe. PhonePe is the Telenor. It will be JustPay. It will be MindGate. These are the TSPs who will actually end up going global. So good outcome will be that we create really powerful global companies as India Stack goes global, which I think inevitably it will.
who feel that until India solves the issue of giving liquidity to institutional investors, and we don't have that kind of money flowing into India, India will not be attractive or may not make as much progress. That's the other view, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
So Anita, one of your colleagues, Venk Shukla, is also part of the National Startup Council. I am there. You know, some of your other friends like Sanjeev Chandani and others are also there. And that's really what we are pushing for. You're 100% right? You know, we need many things to come together, right? This is like cooking. Even if one thing is, you know, all the ingredients and you end up putting too much salt, you know, the dish is gone. So we have to get many things in place. But for those many things in place, we must have a goal, right? And the goal that I think we are trying to describe is that in many industries, we have to be in the circle of 5, ideally a circle of 3. In AI, and I want to spend some time on AI, can we be in a circle of power? You know, China will be an AI power. India will be a consumer of AI, but the question is, will it be a producer of AI, right? And what will it take for India to be a producer of AI? And will there be Europe a producer of AI? In my opinion, unlikely. But if it is, then it's a circle of 4. Maybe there's a circle of 5. But the question is, can India be in that circle of 5? And that is, I think, has to be India's mission in the future. Not to
draw some parallels with the pharma industry, like the generics out of India.
I'm not a fan of generics. I'm controversial here because all our APIs come from China. 80% of them. There's no real. It's just an arbitrage.
But can it begin there today?
It could. And so let's talk about one of the 6 bets that we are making is a bet on orphan diseases. You know why? Because the new disease, some of you know I'm here because of a personal reason. Ninu here and I went to college with a very dear friend of ours who has terminal cancer, so came here to actually for a life celebration yesterday. But if somebody gets cancer, you will now find that they'll get cell therapy rather than chemotherapy. Yes? Right? Because the paradigm, the model of disease has changed. Earlier, because of antibiotics, the model was what do we go and kill? Now the new model is how do we equip the body's metabolism to fight this, right? Where is this idea coming from?
Until we actually solve for risk, I want to just interject this question. Will India be a process country?
No, I think what holds us back is our imagination. If we have imagination and we have the gumption for, the most fungible thing is money. You people will bring money there. I know there are obstacles to bring money and they need to be solved, and I think we must work on them. But to me, there are tier 2 problems. The tier 1 problem is self-belief that we can do this.
Yes.
What has been missing is self-belief. I think the lasting legacy of India Stack is not that it has brought financial inclusion, it will bring jobs because MSMEs will get cash flow lending. Its lasting legacy is that it has brought self-belief that we can do the rest and the world cares, and a bunch of ragtag misfits, who are mostly Sheldons can make this happen, right? And so I think what we are lacking before we get to all this is self-belief. And so the goal is to bring that self-belief to pharma. And the self-belief to pharma requires us to accept that synthetic and computational biology is our trend, right? Which it is. And second, that this new disease model is ours. Where does it come from? Who's trying to steal our disease model?
Yeah.
Don't let it happen. Who said Ayurveda? Right. And it will be a shame if the LLMs of Ayurveda are made by
Somebody else.
and many when the data is there, then talent will come back. After all, many people, Bangalore is full of people who want that. Talent will go back and capital will come. And so I tend to focus on creating this gumption, this desire, right? It has personal data about my talent. And I may want it to give it to a OTA because they may be able to better plan my trip, right? The second is it has aggregate data, which says, what are the patterns of travel that could be important as well. Normally that is given as anonymized data sets, carefully anonymized data sets. Now these two data sets, these two types of data sets, India has realized that if we want this to be an economy which will allow innovation and yet be privacy preserving, then we cannot do this by regulation. We have to do this by techno-legal regulation, which means to shape good behavior of the players. We need public technology and public policy. It's two things shaping the the potter's wheel. You can never make anything with clay unless you put two hands there. So India's innovation, so UPI as a protocol has two benefits. It allows PhonePe to innovate better. It allows RBI to regulate better. Right? It does both simultaneously. Right? So now that model is coming to data. That the two countries who are full fans are France and Japan. We are worried about them eating this away and one day calling it French like yoga. And so but from when I go back, I get back on 10th or 11th of October. The very next week, we have a French are sending one of the senior most professors, Francis Rousseau, AI professor, to be situated in iSpirit for 2 years in Bangalore. Right? Because they want this to be an Indo-European project for data. So if you go to my Twitter, you see my Dragos yesterday, you'll see me have pictures there because they're saying, let us do our AI regulation based on what India is doing. Right? The other people who want this is Japan. So the North, global North, out of the India stack only wants data.
Why Japan? Sorry.
Huh?
Why Japan?
Because Japan decided, and I think it's a very, very good decision. Japan has a mindset saying that you need continental data sets to make really world-class models. And the only way for them to get continental data sets is to be able to secure data from outside Japan. So they introduced an idea called DFFT, please look it up, it's called Data Free Flow with Trust. And they said they could enable free flow of data across country boundaries by only using legal regulation as a means to do that. In India, we know legal regulation is not an answer to anything, right? So we anyway were going down the techno-legal path. And if you again look at the tweets, they are absolutely crazy country. So they were there for G20 in Bangalore, the Japanese digital minister. They said, no, we will come and meet you. So this is their way of respecting, they tweeted about this. So forget even iSpirit tweet. iSpirit is no greed, no glory, so we generally don't talk about this stuff. So they get this idea. Now the question for us is, can we first unlock the continental data of India for Indians? Right? And if we have time, we should talk about that. The short answer to that is yes. That is coming in the next few weeks. What's going to be announced is, however, available on the web. You go to depa.world. So our place, for example, open networks. You can go to ondc.in and you will find everything. We are building 3 open networks. Open, which is for credit. We are building ONDC, which is for commerce, and health, which is the quietest because health is very hard. It's called OCEAN, Open Health Services Network. And if you go to Open, you want to learn about it, you can go to open.dev. But DEPA, because we have so much of interest, called depa.world. So you go to depa.world, on the left hand side you will see how we deal with personal data. That personal data is a 4-year-old project, it's gone mainstream. It's called in financial world the account aggregator, in health world called the PHR. It's got more traction, it's growing at 32% month on month. So that's a robust system, and the new law that was passed on August 12th requires that system to be used for all sectors. But what we're going to announce later is the one to do with aggregate data. And that's on the right hand side of that website called depa.world. All the tech is there, only the talking points on top of it are not there. That will come in the week or 10 days. And then you'll see a cascade of sessions which will tell you about AI regulation. I know some of you are interested in that. It will tell you about the policies that are going to come and stuff like that. All that is coming in the coming days.
Maybe we should take this offline as well.
Yeah.
At some point we are kicked out. He's an endless fountain for all things India staff. There's so much to learn from him. I think it goes without saying that he will keep coming back here more often and inspire us and motivate us.
Can I say something? We did this for 2 years and then COVID came in the way. We were doing this startup bridge India with Stanford. And the idea was, the theme was, this is Stanford University saying this, Asha used to be there. Silicon Valley will innovate for the first billion. At that time, India, there were only 7 billion people, now there are 8. India will innovate for the next 6 billion.
And so we created this event that would happen every year. We've not been able to revive it after COVID, but that was it. And one of our first champions was Dheeraj. And so if you go to the iSpirit website, you'll see Dheeraj's name has been there as an ambassador of iSpirit in the